okay? Now, hiring more people is, we want jobs, we want more security professionals in our industry, but the problem is there actually is a shortage right now. Not only that, but it takes time to bring people on board, and that type of workflow, tier 1 event triage, is not that attractive. I mean, it requires a lot of mundane, repetitive type work. So the challenge with that is not only do you not have the people in our industry, but then keeping them. It's not very stimulating work. So hiring is one way, but it's not going to scale at the event volumes that we're talking about. Next, we could buy more tools, right? Now, more tools sound good. The problem is, though, that it just might be more alerts. Identifying more security issues are a good thing, right? We want to know that it's happening, but we already can't keep up with the event volumes that we're seeing today. Again, on the order of hundreds, sometimes thousands, even tens of thousands, if you're talking about very, very large organizations like MSSPs. So with that, more tools are really just going to magnify the problem. Next, we can come up with better processes. So I think the keynote talked about this a lot. Process, you absolutely need it. If you don't have it, you should have it, and even if you do have it, there's always ways to improve it. The issue with process, though, is it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. It's very opinionated. Every organization has their own process. Every organization is unique. They're a snowflake. They're going to cater processes to themselves, and a lot of times that's not a template that is just readily repeatable across the board. So really, we might need to consider something new, and that is where automation comes in. Okay, so when we think about automation and burning the haystack, the whole goal here is how do we leverage automated tools, either via commercial tools that are available or via program with languages like Python that Justin just covered. That's what we need to leverage in order to burn through the haystack to identify that one event that we really need to pay attention to. All right, so the space, like the industry that's created as a result of this is called Security, Orchestration, Automation, and Response. So we call it SOAR. That's the industry that I work in. SOAR, at least from the Phantom perspective, we focus heavily on the orchestration and automation piece, where in orchestration, you're looking at kind of providing a connective layer of tissue between all the different tools and processes that you have. And then automation is, of course, the machine execution of any tasks that you want to execute by way of processing an event. We're going to step through a lot of examples of what this actually looks like. But first, let's look at definition. So I think the Webster's Dictionary definition of automation is a machine executing a task on behalf of a human, right? So there's a lot of examples of automation today. I mean, that's what technology effectively is. The challenge that we have in our space, and security operations specifically, are that we're not applying enough automation to the response side. So when we look at things like a security event occurring, there's a lot of automation pre-event, right? When you think about pre-event, that is things like intrusion detection systems, AV, endpoint detection, data loss prevention. Basically, the interaction of those tools to say like a SIEM, there's a lot of automation that exists there. But post-event, right, when the SIEM is actually generating alert, there is not a lot of automation that's taking place in that side of the equation. So that's where we really need to focus as practitioners and security professionals to try to find a way to leverage automation as best as we can to burn through that haystack. Orchestration, I kind of mentioned this before, we refer to it as the connective tissue. And so you have all these tools in your SOC, you have all these processes, you need a layer of connective tissue between all of them to better enable automation. Now, we talked a little bit about what security automation orchestration is. Let's talk about what it's not. I think that can be a lot of times more valuable when we talk about what it is. So what it's not, it's absolutely not a replacement for human analysts. So I know that there are some people I've talked to at least that have said, well, with automation, you're really just taking our job away, right? And that's really not the case. We'll talk about that in the next slide. It's also not the silver bullet unicorn for solving this problem. It does take work. It's not just something that you just plug in, hit a button, and say, great, my problems are all solved. You need expertise, you need specialists to really look at this and optimize your processes, build your processes out. So if you're looking at automation, I wouldn't go in with the expectation that you just hit a button and it all works. I'm on the product management side for these type of tools. Our goal, our teams with engineering and product and everything like that, we want to get to the point where a customer can install, hit a button, and it's done. But the space it's very, very early, right? Especially compared to other spaces like firewall, for example. It's been around for many decades. SOAR is brand new. The starting point for SOAR is Python programming, right? And we'll talk about that. But that's a starting point. If you think about that, everything that Justin just went through, where you literally have an editor, you're writing a script, that's the starting point. And the next step are tools that give you more visual programming capability and testing capability and simulation and those type of things. After that, I'd say that we're a few more years away, would be hit a button and it takes care of itself. But again, we're not there yet. Also, it's not more blinky lights, right? So a lot of people, when they think automation, they think it's some system you put in, press that button, and all of a sudden stuff lights up. It's not quite as flashy as that. You'll find that in automation, even with commercial tools, you'll get involved with Python, you'll get involved with programming, those type of things. So back to automation taking or not taking our jobs. David Autor did a really interesting TED Talk where he talked about automation displacing jobs, right? Or is it happening, is it not happening? And he actually talked a lot about how it's really not happening. And the example he used were ATMs back in the 70s, where those first came out, and the bank tellers in their space were really, really concerned about losing their jobs to an automated machine that's in money. If you look at the stats over the last 30 years, that position, specifically bank tellers, have actually doubled. The numbers have doubled. And in his talk, he talks a lot about how automation isn't necessarily a replacement for any human job, but really it elevates the humans and the jobs that they were doing to kind of apply their skills to more meaningful tasks or more tasks that require more cognitive abilities. So it's an interesting talk. I would definitely take a look at it. But as you're thinking about automation, if you're trying to sell it internally at your own organization, you're facing that type of resistance, think about it that way. It's not displacing the tier 1 analysts. It's enabling them to do more meaningful work. And then when you go back to the people side and hiring and those type of things, if you're giving them more meaningful work, they're going to stay around. Like students don't go to school or study computer science or security to copy and paste data from one tool to another. You actually want to look at real security problems, real security process, and improve the security posture of your organization. The problem today are that tier 1 analysts aren't empowered to do that. So automation empowers them to do that. I think that's something that anyone should keep in mind if they're facing resistance on introducing automation. So this is a diagram we use often to show the general workflow within a SOC. It's called the OODA loop, Observe, Orient, Decide, Act. It's a common term that's used in a lot of military situations where basically they say whoever can execute this loop the fastest, the adversary or the defender, is going to win the battle. Unfortunately for us, the adversaries are able to execute this much more quickly. They have automation available for them to execute their attacks against our organizations. Us as defenders, we need to leverage this and automate this and execute it as quickly as we possibly can. When you look back to the left-hand side, the observe and orient side, this is pre-event. I talked about this before. This is very well automated. But what comes out the other side are events. And those events land on the decision-making part, where tier 1 analysts receive them. Again, the volumes that we're talking about, they are, in many organizations, I'd say in the hundreds. I know other organizations that are operating literally at the thousands or tens of thousands of events per day. If you think about from a timing perspective, if it takes you, let's say at a minimum, 5 to 10 minutes to process one of these, but at most 60 minutes or maybe several hours, multiplying that by even 100 requires a staff of 10 individuals. And I don't think, I don't know many SOCs that have 10 individuals in their team. So again, when you start looking at the scale, you need automation. Now, some best practices on getting started, and then we'll jump into some real use cases. When you go into automation and say you're going to write this yourself in Python or leverage a platform, you get really excited, you think of the use cases, and kind of you just jump into the platform you want to work. When we work with customers, we advise to kind of step back and think about this at a higher level. Start with the goals, right? So what is it that you want to automate? What are the specific use cases? Are these things like threat hunting use cases? Are these SIM-alerts that you're processing? Phishing emails? Are they just ticket management or user management? You have to think through at a high level, what are the use cases? What are your goals in automation? Also, do some self-reflection on where you're spending most of your time or where your tier 1 analysts are spending their time. That's usually a great place to start as well in terms of identifying opportunities for automation. Go to a whiteboard, write these things out. Go into PowerPoint or Visio or on a sheet of paper, write these things out. It's very similar to like anybody that took any computer science courses going into school. When you take a programming class, the first thing that they teach you before writing your program is to literally write an outline of this before implementing, right? It makes you think through your problem-solving approach, and then when you go to implement, it's much easier. So with us, with our customers and users, we do the exact same thing. We literally whiteboard these things out. We'll draw them out in Visio, draw them out in PowerPoint, get the workflow built out, identify areas where we can automate, and then we go implement from there. So to get started, some things that you need. First, identify the processes that you want to automate. And again, it goes beyond just what high-level processes. Actually peel back the onion and look at the individual steps that you want to execute, okay, before you start working on this. Next, your security tools need APIs. Okay, so I think this is less of a problem now. I think back, say 5 to 10 years ago, a lot of vendors were not publishing APIs, but now that automation and scripting languages like Python are so popular, the customers are pushing all of these vendors to publish RESTful APIs for all of their products. So really the UI on all these products that are invoking action inside of the actual tool, they're leveraging the same REST API that you would be leveraging from a programming perspective. So make sure that your tools have APIs. If they don't, push the vendor to give them to you. A lot of times they may say that they're not available or they don't have them, but if you push harder, it's very likely that they have like a private API or something like that, and they might be able to give it to you. It's not the case with everybody, it's worth a try to push. And then next, you need scripting knowledge, right? Python is the one that I hear all the time. So it was really cool to see Justin's talk about the intro to Python. I see it everywhere. I work on the product side where we supply a platform for these things, but the customers I work with started by automating all these workflows in Python. Python is really good at managing data, and when you're doing these, interacting with these RESTful APIs of all these tools, they're sending boatloads of data. There's dictionaries and lists and those type of things that they send over in a JSON format, and Python is exceptional at handling all those things in a very high performance way. So definitely invest some time in understanding that. And I mentioned already a platform. So a platform is also an alternative. There are a lot of free options out there. A lot of people call them community edition platforms where you can download them and get started. So feel free to check that out. But I think that the first three are your basics, right? You need to make sure you have a process. You need to make sure that your tools that you're using have APIs, and you need to make sure that you have some scripting skills, right? Most often it's Python, but it could be JavaScript, it could be Perl. Don't hit me, Justin. It could be a lot of other things as well.
If you don't want to read your code later, that's not my problem.
Yeah, that's right. All right, so some success stories. I hope there's some Tiger fans in here. Let's talk about some use cases. So first, I think I have about 10 of these use cases that we'll plow through pretty quickly. And by the way, you'll see here Python on the left-hand side, and then you see a visual representation on the right-hand side. A lot of commercial tools that you may interact with for this will offer visual programming, where they look like a business process flow modeling kind of UI that you'd be used to in something, again, like a Visio, but they're actually generating Python or some other code in the back end. But first, this example is MSSP Security Event Triage. So they're servicing many customers. They're receiving literally hundreds of events in a day's time. If you think about an analyst processing every single one of these, if it takes 5 minutes per event, I mean that's 3 individuals right there, gone, right? And doing nothing but what this use case is doing, which is, first step, checking their ticketing system if the ticket exists. If it doesn't, create it. If it does, then query your SIM to gather additional information about the event and then post it to the ticket and update it. That is not fun. Nobody went and got a degree in info security or information systems to do that type of work. That's not fun. That's something that you could leverage automation to kind of, again, burn down that haystack and get to more meaningful work. The next one, phishing. Phishing is one of the top use cases that I come across, and it's also one of the easiest to implement. In this particular example, a software company basically has their suspicious email inbox. They have an automation platform listening in on that inbox. They retrieve the email, rip it apart. They'll get all the individual artifacts or indicators associated with it. So they'll pull domains, IP addresses, URLs, those type of things, and they'll basically do some reputation scoring. They may detonate the URL if there's a URL in there. But in this particular case, they actually, after interrogating the email, they moved on to like actual containment actions. So here they wanted to do things like block domain and open DNS, as well as block file hashes via FireEye. Now what's really cool about this is they leverage the automation system to send a Duo request or request over Duo to the analyst. They receive it on their phone or their workstation, whatever they're working on. They see the request. Do you want to proceed with this block hash? Do you want to proceed with this block domain? They see the event details, authenticate to Duo, approve, and then the automation proceeds with blocking this. So this is a combination of both automating mundane tasks, but also accelerating the speed of execution on the response side. Again, when you think back to that OODA loop, you have to decide what you want to do, and then you have to ultimately act on it. By automating not only the actions, but then asking the analyst, do you just want to proceed with this? It enables them to just quickly approve, as well as they're not needing to log into those platforms to execute the actions. They're leveraging the automation system. So what would ordinarily take 10 minutes to execute now takes 10 seconds. Next is domain blocking. So this is another one, same software company. They set up basically a playbook where they did not want to log into OpenDNS to block their domains. It just, again, it takes time. You have to log in, authenticate, go to a few menus, select the block. What they did is they set up a playbook where they said, here, we're gonna have a specific email inbox where all we're gonna do is send an email with the domain that we want to block into this inbox. The automation system will be listening in on it. It'll pull in the email, again, rip the contents apart, extract the domain, execute the block domain on OpenDNS for them. So if you think about that, it's much easier. Even on your phone, I can send an email to this inbox, just put the domain, and it goes off and it blocks it for me. Much easier than logging into OpenDNS, going through a menu, and executing the block. Next is hash hunting. So here, this financial company, a lot of these companies subscribe to threat intel services, right? And what they'll do is when they get a bulletin or report, there will be thousands of indicators that are a part of that. Now, trying to basically interrogate your own environment for these indicators in a manual way is near impossible, right? You have to script it. And actually, this is an area where Python's used a lot. So with Python, again, you would get these things in a list or a dictionary, parse through it, and then invoke APIs to hunt for this activity. That's exactly what they did here. They basically ingest the list. They'll use their EDR tools, something like a CrowdStrike or a Carbon Black or a Tanium, to see if that hash actually exists anywhere on the endpoints, and then they can take it a step further and actually go forward and block hashes. Another one, another email phishing example. Here what we're doing is basically ingesting from both PhishMe as well as directly from the IMAP inbox. Now, why you need automation here, when you're getting from other tools like a PhishMe triage, what they'll do is they'll usually add their own metadata around the artifacts. And this is more for kind of better use inside of their own tool. But when you actually get the JSON from them, now you have these headers and these trailers that are surrounding the URLs that make automation a pain, right? So what this customer did was they wrote a playbook to ingest from both sources, and then they normalized the URLs, right? They ripped the headers and trailers off, and now you have normalized URLs that you can pass through the remaining investigation process, which would be, again, things like domain reputation scoring, URL detonation, and the like. So here's another one, alert suppression. I talked about SIMs. Customers are receiving hundreds of thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of SIM alerts a day. It can get overwhelming. Not all SIMs are optimal at alert suppression. So this customer basically implemented logic to suppress these alerts, right? So setting certain thresholds, certain scoring associated with each individual alert, and then you kind of eliminate the noise and only highlight those of the highest thresholds to the analyst. Next, another example of alert suppression. In this particular case, the customer wrote logic in their playbook to say, if it's not coming from this particular workstation or not coming from this particular domain, I don't want to see it, right? So you can start to embed really customized logic on what you do or don't want to see. This one, I personally love this one. I think it's really good because it keeps the vendor honest. In this particular scenario, the customer was maintaining their own malware repo and checking it against VirusTotal. So when they receive their threat intel of suspected malware and file hashes associated with it, they take all those file hashes, they run a file reputation lookup against VirusTotal, and they're specifically looking at their two AV engines to see if those AV engines are tracking those file hashes. If they are not tracking them, what they'll do is they'll download the file from VirusTotal, and then they're going to email it to the vendor and make them aware that their AV engine are not tracking those particular files and request that they update the .dat file programming the logic for the engine. So I thought this one was awesome because it's not only taking proactive measures internally to identify malware and then taking all the corrective actions with it, but it's also keeping the vendor honest as well, which I thought was a really cool use case. This one, school system, they were doing alert triage. They were managing all their alerts through email, which I don't suggest that it's what they were doing. This is an example of basically a switching playbook. So they receive all their events and they're picking the events apart, and they're basically using it to classify the event to determine what are the downstream automation workflows that I want to run as a result of this being data loss or this being a malware outbreak or something along those lines. So just a few more. This one, they were running a malware bytes remediation scan, basically scanning endpoints for particular malware, doing corrective action. Pretty similar to some previous use cases. So you can see here there's a lot of commonality here, things that they're automating. It's mundane, repetitive processes, scanning, data transfers, those type of things. And then, let's see, this one is another phishing example. Except in this particular use case, they're leveraging whitelisting. So we all know about whitelisting, but they're basically using lists that they built in Python to ignore particular domains, particular users, or URLs. Now, the last one that I want to cover is who here manages any like suspicious email inboxes or anything like that? Yeah. All right, so you always have a problem where somebody forwards you an email that's suspicious, which is great, that's the behavior you want, but they don't actually attach the email. They just forward the text. And then you're missing all the headers. So this customer basically implemented a workflow that said, when they receive the email, they're going to check for the attachment. If the attachment isn't there and the headers are missing, it actually auto-responds back to the sender with the exact instructions of how to attach the email. So if you think about stuff like this, say you get 30 of these a day, that's annoying. Nobody wants to do that. Again, it's fit for automation. And then the last one, I promise the last one this time, is registry key. So this one is monitoring similar. It's where as registry keys are being added to the registry run key, it's basically sending an alert. Automation will go out and fetch the file that was responsible for adding that key. It's going to retrieve the file, detonate it in a sandbox, and then look to see if it's malware. If it's malware, then it's going to take corrective action. But what's great about this is, again, say you receive 20 to 30 of these a day. Well, if I can use automation to only highlight to me the one or two that are really malware, and I can resolve the remaining 18 to 30 or whatever they are, that makes my life much easier. So, final slide, key takeaways. How do you get started? Think about the processes. Think about your tools, okay? Get some scripting knowledge as well. That's very helpful. Script with APIs, and then look at some platforms. There's a lot of free alternatives out there, and then if your company has budget to leverage a real commercial platform, you can do that, but you're not forced to do that. You can leverage Python. Again, a lot of the platforms that drive this are leveraging Python underneath the hood. What you'll find with commercial platforms is they give you the tools to kind of get up and running much quicker, much easier. You get support, those type of things. But everything that I just showed you here, you're enabled 100% through Python and RESTful APIs. So that's it.
All right.